Episode 7 Camp Half-Blood, Part 1. I can't believe we've made it this far, and I've neglected to tell you about Camp Half-Blood, the place I keep insisting is where you need to be if you can get here, the safest place for people like us. For those of you who don't know, my name is Calyx Carter. I'm the daughter of the Greek goddess Athena, and I started making these podcasts because of a dream from her. Today, I'll start telling you about Camp Half-Blood. There are currently 20 cabins at Camp Half-Blood, for the 12 Olympians as well as some important minor gods. Demigods who attend camp stay in their parents' respective cabin. Way back when there were only 12 cabins, they were shaped in a sort of U, with Zeus and Hera at the head, but now it's shaped as an omega, with the new additions to camp acting like the long tail of the shape. Each cabin is uniquely designed and crafted to match the aesthetic of the god or goddess they represent. For example, Athena's cabin 6 is very plain on the outside, a simple gray concrete building with the design of an owl over the door and white curtains in the windows. Inside, however, it is designed like a workshop and library. The library holds stock to over 1,000 books, old scrolls, and loose articles on the varying topics. There's benches and tables to study on, and the workshop houses several 3D print models, blueprints, and things like modeling clay. Oh, and all our beds have been pushed to one side of the room, which leaves us more space to expand our learning areas. We even have a big map of... I digress. Anyway, compare the Athena cabin to cabin 7, Apollo. Apollo's cabin's exterior is made entirely of pure gold. It seems to glow during the daytime, as Apollo is the god of sun, among other things, but I'm not really sure if it's actually glowing or if it's just the sun reflecting on it. And while this exterior is much flashier than cabin 6, Athena's cabin's interior definitely outshines Apollo's. Like most cabins, Apollo's holds bunk beds for campers to sleep on, with the exception of a cot in the middle of the cabin in case somebody gets injured and is either a child of Apollo or is hurt so bad they can't be taken to the big house. Other than a few flower pots and a small bookshelf of medical supplies, books about medicine, and Apollo, cabin 7 is pretty basic on the inside. Of course, although most cabins house at least one demigod, there are a few cabins at camp that are empty. For example, Hera does not have any children and never will, yet sitting beside Zeus's cabin is her very own. Why? It's an honorary cabin. She's still one of the 12 Olympians, and it appeases them when we give them temples or places of worship. This cabin has no beds inside whatsoever. Instead, a very large and kind of creepy statue of the goddess with a fireplace at her feet. But this begs the question, how do you know what cabin you're in? I've mentioned claiming before, namely about how I missed my own, but we're going to get more in-depth. By the time a demigod turns 13, they are to be claimed by their godly parent. That being said, gods usually like to make a show of it, so you're more likely to be claimed at the campfire that happens every night in front of the whole camp. How you get claimed is up to your godly parent, but more often than not, it's a sort of holographic symbol that would appear over your head. For example, child of Hephaestus, you might look up and see a fiery hammer glowing over your head, or maybe a child of Demeter, in which case a golden sickle with a few sheaths of wheat might erupt over your head. No boy and girl are allowed in a cabin alone, and you aren't allowed to sleep in another parent's cabin unless strictly permitted. Before you're claimed, though, and if you're claimed by a minor god who doesn't yet have a cabin at camp, there is a special circumstance in which cabin 11, the Hermes cabin, will act as your cabin. Hermes, being the god of travelers and hospitality, etc., it makes sense. Before the rule was made that gods had to claim their children by 13, and there were only 12 cabins, cabin 11 was almost always full, and due to the lack of beds in relation to the number of demigods, some kids even had to sleep on the floor in sleeping bags. Now, it's mostly just the Hermes kids, a few younger demigods, and even fewer kids whose parents don't have a cabin. Rest assured, we are working on building more. Now that you know about the cabins and claiming, I'd like to move on to the horse, the myth, the legend who runs camp, Chiron. Some of you might recall the name from Greek mythology. Chiron, a centaur, trained very famous demigods including Jason, Achilles, and Heracles. Now, he runs Camp Half-Blood to train us, modern-day demigods. Dionysus, Greek god of wine, used to help him out as punishment, but has since been left off the hook, leaving Chiron all alone. Might I be the billionth person to say there is no better teacher than Chiron? He's in the corner of the room shaking his head, but I see you smiling, Chiron! The horseman is very good at easing demigods into this new reality. He's patient with newcomers' questions and entertains every idea you could possibly have. Not to mention he's such a good teacher, rule enforcer, and conflict corrector. Some of you know it's in his office in the big house with his computer that I make these videos. Sure, Athena sent me the dream, but without his permission when I approached him with the idea, this podcast wouldn't exist. So, you've heard a bit about the cabins and the big house, but Camp Half-Blood has many more buildings and areas to offer. Granted, Chiron is tapping his wrist, so I haven't much time left to record. Let me explain. I have to record in small bursts every week to avoid sending out too much of a signal. So perhaps all of Camp's interesting locations will have to wait, but I can tell you about the magical border that's protecting Camp. Way back when, Camp's borders were protected by demigods on a schedule, keeping monsters out of Camp. Over the years, cabins contributed ideas for how to ramp up defenses, such as automatons. When a daughter of Zeus gave her life to defend her friends, Zeus turned her into a pine tree and gave us a magical barrier which keeps out mortals and monsters alike, as well as has the ability for Chiron to control the weather at will. When the pine tree began to die, we added on the golden fleece, ensuring the border would remain strong, and that is currently guarded by a dragon named Peleus. Added even more recently is that of the Athena Parthenos, which is a very large statue of my mother. It doesn't necessarily enforce the border or anything, but if Camp is under attack, it does provide extra protection in keeping us safe. Just know that you're safe when you see the tree on the hill. More later, I promise, but until then, remember to watch your backs, take care of yourselves, and if you survive, I'll see you again next week.